Walk down a narrow ginnel in Ulverston. The cobbles are slick, the walls lean in. You can smell damp stone and last night's rain. Look up, the walls are painted ochre, pastel blue, cheerful, welcoming, tourist ready. Look closer. Through the cracks in the render you can see the rubble-stone underneath, industrial, dark, unforgiving. This is the poem I want to share today. Welcome to Alden Carrow's Poetry Podcast. I'm Alden Carrow, author of Cumbrian verse, Lakes to Fells in Poetry. Every week we slow down, we listen closely, we discover the poetry living in market squares, in stagnant canals, in the gap between what a place pretends to be and what it actually is. Today's journey, The Windhover by Gerard Manley Hopkins, a falcon riding the wind over Welsh hills, a poem about mastery and beauty in violent motion. Then my own poem, Ulverston, where industry dissolves into souvenir, but the grit persists underneath the paint. After that, something completely different. How to promote poetry on TikTok. Yes, really. Short form video, long form art. I'll show you how they work together. And finally, I want to hear from you. What guest poem should I read next? Email me at aldencarrow78@gmail.com. That's aldencarrow78@gmail.com. Let's begin where the paint starts to peel. When we consider the theme of our episode today, which is the profound persistence of industrial identity beneath the various surface transformations of our modern world, we have to look for poets who understand what it means to dig beneath the superficial layer of reality to find the burning core underneath. For this, I could think of no one better than the Victorian Jesuit priest and incredibly innovative poet, Gerard Manley Hopkins. His poem, The Windhover, is a nature poem, a beautiful, breathless observation of a kestrel in flight. But if we look closer, if we really sit with the language and the violent, heavy, glorious imagery of its conclusion, we find a poem deeply concerned with the friction of existence, the labour of the earth, and the hidden fires that burn within the seemingly mundane. Hopkins lived during the height of the Industrial Revolution, a time when the very surface of the earth in Britain was being radically transformed, dug up, paved over and filled with the smoke of progress. He was a man who often felt isolated, trapped between his profound spiritual callings and his immense raw sensitivity to the natural and changing world around him. He developed a concept he called inscape, which was his word for the unique, inner, distinctive design or identity of a thing. He believed that no matter how much the outward appearance of something might change or weather or degrade, its inscape remained beautifully intact, a divine blueprint that simply required the right kind of attention to be perceived. This connects so perfectly to our modern northern towns, places that have lost their heavy industries, places that have been painted over with the bright pastel colours of the tourist trade, but which retain an unbreakable, heavy, industrial inscape in their bones. I chose this poem because it teaches us how to look at something that seems ordinary, or perhaps even bleak, and discover the staggering, dangerous heat inside it. It teaches us that the grit, the labour, and the sheer plod of existence are not things to be hidden away, but are in fact the very mechanisms that polish our world and make it shine. Before I read The Windhover, I want to invite you to place yourself in the landscape of this poem. Imagine you're walking out on an early, crisp, damp morning. The sky is a shifting tapestry of clouds and breaking light. You look up, and there, suspended in the currents of the air, is a kestrel, a small falcon. It's hovering entirely stationary against the immense pressure of the wind, holding its place through an absolute mastery of the elements, making minute mechanical adjustments with its wings. Hopkins dictates this poem to Christ our Lord, and it's written in a form that he radically adapted, the Petrarchan sonnet. He uses what he famously called sprung rhythm, a way of counting the beats in a line that mimics the natural, breathless cadence of human speech and the irregular, forceful rhythms of nature itself. It is a dense, almost overwhelming rush of syllables, packed with internal rhyme, alliteration, and compound adjectives that make the words feel like they are tumbling over one another in their rush to convey the ecstasy of the sight. The poem is divided into two parts, the octave and the sestet. The first 8 lines describe the astonishing aerial display of the bird, the sheer physical brilliance of its flight, but then there is a turn, a deep pivot in the final 6 lines. The perspective drops from the dizzying heights of the sky down to the heavy, muddy earth. We are brought into the world of human labour, to the ploughman in the fields, and finally down to the domestic hearth, to the dying coals of a fire. It is in this downward trajectory, from the ethereal to the material, from the sky to the dirt, that the true miracle of the poem is revealed. Hopkins is telling us that we do not need to look only to the heavens to find majesty. The majesty is in the friction. It's in the hard, repetitive work. It's in the cold ashes that still hold a burning heart. As I read this, let the sheer velocity of the words wash over you, and pay special attention to those final 3 lines, where the poem transforms from an observation of nature into a profound manifesto on the beauty of hard, grinding labour and hidden fire. I caught this morning's minion, kingdom of daylight's dauphin, dapple-dawn-drawn Falcon, in his riding of the rolling level underneath him steady air, and striding high there, how he rung upon the rein of a wimpling wing in his ecstasy, then off forth on swing, as a skate's heel sweep smooth on a bow bend, the hurl and gliding rebuff the big wind. My heart in hiding stirs for a bird, the achieve of, the mastery of the thing. Brute beauty and valour and act, O air, pride, plume, here, buckle, and the fire that breaks from thee, then, a billion times told lovelier, more dangerous, O my chevalier. No wonder of it. Sheer plod makes ploughed down sillion shine, and blue-bleak embers, ah my dear, fall gall themselves, and gash gold-vermilion. The breathtaking velocity of that opening is almost physical in its impact. I caught this morning's minion, immediately establishes a sense of fleeting capture, as if the poet has managed to seize a single, perfect frame from a moving picture. The language Hopkins uses to describe the falcon is incredibly rich, elevating this small bird of prey to the status of royalty, kingdom of daylight's dauphin. But it is the mechanical precision of the bird's flight that I find most compelling in the context of our theme. The falcon is riding of the rolling level underneath him steady air. It feels like an engine, a perfect piece of natural machinery harnessing the invisible currents of the world. He compares the bird's sweeping turn to a skate's heel sweep smooth on a bow bend, introducing an element of human design, of polished steel cutting across the ice. The bird is rebuffing the big wind through the achieve of, the mastery of the thing. This is not just a passive piece of nature, it is a working, striving, active force. The poet's own heart in hiding is stirred by this display of absolute competence and power. But then we hit the magnificent, violent turn of the poem at the word buckle. This is where the poem shifts dramatically. All the pride, the plume, the air, the valour of the bird suddenly buckle. They collapse, they join together under pressure, they break. And what happens when this perfect surface gives way? And the fire that breaks from thee then, a billion times told lovelier, more dangerous. The true hidden energy of the creature is revealed through this buckling, through this friction. And it is here that Hopkins makes his most profound leap, bringing us directly into the theme of the persistence of identity beneath the surface. He tells us no wonder of it. It's not a surprise that this fire exists beneath the surface, because we see this principle everywhere in the working world. He gives us two immortal examples. First, sheer plod makes plough down sillion shine. The sillion is the heavy turned earth of the furrow. To the untrained eye, a muddy field is just a muddy field. It's a dull, heavy and grey thing. But Hopkins points out that this is the sheer plod, the agonising, repetitive, relentless labour of the ploughman and the heavy horse dragging the iron blade through the dirt that actually polishes that dirt until it shines like a mirror in the sun. The friction of the hard work reveals the hidden beauty of the earth. The surface of the field is transformed not by magic, but by grind, by grit, by relentless persistence. And then his final image, blue-bleak embers are, my dear, fall gall themselves and gash gold-vermilion. Think of a coal fire that has burned down in the grate. The surface of the coals is ashen, dead, a depressing blue-bleak. It looks like a completely spent force. This is the exact image of so many post-industrial towns in the north of England today. The mills are closed, the forges are quiet, the chimneys no longer smoke. The surface appears blue-bleak and cold, but Hopkins knows that the inscape, the true identity, persists. When those embers fall, when they strike the grate, when they gall themselves, meaning to break the skin, to cause a wound or friction, they crack open to reveal an astonishing, dangerous, burning interior. They gash gold-vermilion. The industrial fire is still there, locked inside the ash. The surface transformation, the cooling of the exterior, is an illusion. The core identity of the heavy, dark, calm and rich coal is pure, intense heat. This poem tells us that beneath the veneer of quiet, beneath the blue-bleak exterior of our changing landscapes, there's a persistent, glowing, gold-vermilion soul that cannot be extinguished, an identity forged in the sheer plod of generations. Moving on from the high skies of Hopkins' Falcon down to the heavy limestone and slate of the northern landscape, I want to share a poem of my own that grapples directly with this idea of surface transformation and the stubborn persistence of an industrial past. The poem is called Ulverston, and it's named after a magnificent, peculiar market town situated on the Furness Peninsula in Cumbria. Ulverston is a place caught geographically and historically in a fascinating liminal space. It sits just outside the boundary of the Lake District National Park, huddled under the high fells, but it also reaches out towards the treacherous, shifting sands of Morecambe Bay. For a long time it was a deeply industrial town, a crucial hub for the export of iron ore, copper and slate. It boasts what was once the shortest, deepest and widest canal in Europe, a massive, straight cut, engineered through the marshland to allow large ships to reach the town's forge and factories straight from the sea. Today, however, the heavy industry has largely departed. The town has reinvented itself. It's known as a festival town, famously hosting a beautiful, delicate lantern festival every year, and its streets are lined with quaint cafes, independent shops, and tourists looking for a picturesque day out. I chose this poem because I've always been deeply moved by the tension in Ulverston streets. When you walk through it, you can see the desperate attempt to paint over the harshness of its history with pastel colours and boutique charm. But the bones of the town, the massive chunks of local limestone, the claustrophobic ginnels built for factory workers to rush through in the dark, and the silent, heavy water of the canal basin, they all refuse to play along with the quaint narrative. The industrial identity isn't dead, it's simply waiting beneath the paint. This poem is my attempt to capture that friction, to document the feeling of a place that is dissolving into a souvenir itself. while a profound, unyielding grit remains anchored in its very foundations. Before I read Ulverston, let me paint the picture of the physical space for you. Imagine a sky the colour of bruised iron pressing down on a landscape that feels inherently heavy. To the north, the massive rolling shoulders of the Cumbrian fells loom over the rooftops, creating a sense of gravity, as if the entire town is sliding downhill toward the marsh. You're standing in a maze of narrow, twisting alleys known locally as ginnels. These pathways were not designed for leisurely strolls. They were cut into the stone to allow the fastest possible route for workers moving from their cramped terraced houses to the factories and the canal side. The cobbles underfoot are slick with the perpetual northern damp, hard and unforgiving. As you step out of the ginnels into the main streets, you see the houses. They're built of rough, dark rubble-stone, but their facades have been covered in smooth render and painted in bright, cheerful colours: ochre, pastel blue, soft pink, and it's a striking visual contrast, this bright crust hiding the dark, ancient core. Above you, the roofs are covered in Lakeland slate, a material that, in the rain, takes on a deep, dark oil sheen, reminding you of the grease and the smoke of the machinery that used to dominate the skyline. And then there's the canal. It's no longer a bustling artery of commerce. It's a quiet, straight scar across the land. Its locks stagnant, the old iron gears rusting and flaking away into the silt. This poem traces this journey from the heavy hills through the busy, repetitive commerce of the market square, down to the forgotten industrial machinery of the canal basin, and finally looks at how the town measures its modern existence through the fragile, beautiful but fleeting tradition of paper lanterns. It's an exploration of what is lost, what is covered up, and what stubbornly, quietly refuses to wash away in the rain. The hill is a pale grey weight against the north, a limestone heavy shoulder where the fells go slack. The town is gathered in the gravitational tilt, pinned between the white tower and the marsh, a huddled habit of stone and slate. Wind funnels into the ginnels where cobbles turn the ankle hard and wet. The walls are rendered in ochre and pastel blue, a bright crust over the rubble-stone core, roofed in the dark oil sheen of Lakeland slate. Twice a week, the iron frames go up, the morning clatter of trade in the square. Time is a loop of bread and thread, a commerce that repeats until it is bone. A straight cut bleeds toward the tide, the shortest line between the forge and salt. One labour ends, another takes the stagnant lock. Machinery seizes in the quiet basin, rust flaking down into the silt and years. The year is measured out in paper lanterns, burning briefly against the damp. Nothing is lost, only folded back in, industry dissolving into the souvenir. The grit persists underneath the paint. The opening lines of Ulverston immediately establish a landscape defined by weight and restriction. The hill is a pale grey weight against the north, a limestone heavy shoulder where the fells go slack. The town is not simply placed on the map, it's trapped by geography, pinned between the white tower and the marsh. There is a sense of inevitability in the architecture, described as a huddled habit of stone and slate. A habit is something done repeatedly, unconsciously, and here the very gathering of the buildings feels like a defensive crouch against the weather and the landscape. We then move into the intimate spaces, the ginnels where cobbles turn the ankle hard and wet. I wanted to emphasise the physical hostility of the old industrial infrastructure. It's not designed for comfort, it's designed for utility. Then we arrive at the central metaphor of the poem's theme. The walls are rendered in ochre and pastel blue, a bright crust over the rubble-stone core. This is the surface transformation. The town is dressing up. It's applying makeup to its rough rubble-stone face to present a more palatable, picturesque version of itself to the world. But the roofs give it away. They are roofed in the dark oil sheen of Lakeland slate, a subtle nod to the indelible stain of the industrial era that cannot be completely whitewashed. The middle stanza shifts to the human element, the ongoing survival of the town through its market. Twice a week, the iron frames go up, the morning clatter of trade in the square. I'd describe this as time is a loop of bread and thread, a commerce that repeats until it's bone. This echoes Hopkins' sheer plod. It's the unending generational cycle of buying, selling, surviving, a grind that wears down the people and the place until only the absolute essential structure, the bone, remains. Then the poem moves down to the water. A straight cut bleeds toward the tide, the shortest line between the forge and salt. The canal is described as a bleed, an unnatural, violent incision into the landscape made out of sheer industrial necessity. But now machinery seizes in the quiet basin, rust flaking down into the silt in years. The physical apparatus of the town's original identity is rotting away, dissolving into the earth. Finally, we reach the modern era where the year is measured out in paper lanterns, burning briefly against the damp. The Lantern Festival is visually stunning, but it is paper thin, it is transient. It burns briefly and it's gone, a stark contrast to the heavy, eternal permanence of the iron, the limestone and the slate. I write, nothing is lost, only folded back in, industry dissolving into the souvenir. This is the tragedy and the reality of so many places in the north. The deep, complex, painful history of industrial labour is flattened out, simplified and sold back to visitors as a charming souvenir. It's a radical surface transformation. But the poem ends with a stubborn refusal. The grit persists underneath the paint. Just like the blue-bleak embers that gash gold-vermilion when struck, the true identity of Ulverston, the sheer grit of the generations who hauled the ore and navigated the straight cut, cannot be erased by a layer of pastel paint. The aesthetic may change, the economy may pivot, the surface may transform to meet the demands of a new century, but the fundamental, heavy, unyielding soul of the place remains perfectly, immutably intact. In our discussion segment today, I want to take this overarching theme of surface transformation and the persistence of underlying identity and apply it to something completely different, yet surprisingly relevant to the life of a modern writer: the art of promoting poetry using TikTok. Now I know what many of you are thinking, the very juxtaposition of deep, reflective, slow poetry and a fast-paced, algorithm-driven, hyper-visual social media platform like TikTok seems entirely contradictory. It sounds like an oxymoron. TikTok is often viewed as the ultimate surface transformation of our culture. It's perceived as a place of fleeting trends, of 15-second dances, of loud music, of paper lanterns burning very briefly against the damp of the digital void. It's the pastel blue paint rendered over the rubble-stone core of human communication. What I discovered, and what I want to share with you, is that underneath this chaotic, rapid-fire surface, the fundamental human hunger for meaning, for rhythm, for connection, and for landscape, the gold-vermilion grit of our shared identity, persists stronger than ever. People are scrolling through endless streams of noise, and they are incredibly thirsty for a moment of quiet. They're desperate for a piece of content that forces them to stop, to breathe, and to feel the weight of a limestone-heavy shoulder. So how do we, as poets who write about landscape and memory, navigate this space? First, we must understand that we don't need to change our inscape to fit the platform. We don't need to perform. We simply need to use the visual medium to frame the text. The key to promoting poetry on TikTok is contrast. If the rest of the feed is loud and frantic, your video must be an anchor of stillness. When I create a video, I don't follow the trending sounds. Instead, I take my camera out into the landscape I write about. I film the rain falling on the dark oil sheen of Lakeland slate. I film the rust flaking off the gears in the quiet basin of the Ulverston canal. I film the wind moving over the fells. These slow, atmospheric, deeply grounded visual textures act as the perfect counterbalance to the digital noise. Over this footage, I record myself reading the poem, slowly, deliberately. I let the sprung rhythm of the words do the heavy lifting. I put the text of the poem on the screen, stanza by stanza, allowing the viewer to read along, to absorb the words visually as well as orally. This accessibility is crucial. TikTok is democratizing poetry in a way that the traditional publishing industry simply can't. It bypasses the gatekeepers, the elite literary magazines, and the academic reviews, taking the words directly to the people, much like the travelling bards of the past. The algorithm, often viewed as a cold, heartless machine, is actually incredibly sensitive to retention and emotional resonance. If someone stops scrolling to listen to 5 seconds of a poem about the industrial north, the algorithm will find 10 more people who feel the same hidden ache. It's a remarkable tool for community building, but it requires the sheer plod. It requires the consistency of showing up, of posting regularly, of honing your craft, of facing the silence of the algorithm with the same steadfast determination that a ploughman faces the muddy field. You are turning the digital sillion, trusting that the friction will eventually make it shine. It's also important to remember the ephemeral nature of the platform. A video may go viral, reaching tens of thousands of people in a day, and then disappear entirely from the feed by the next morning. It's exactly like the paper lanterns, but the impact of that brief burn is not lost. It's folded back in. A viewer who felt a sudden, sharp connection to a line about blue-bleak embers might buy your book, or they might simply carry that line in with them into their day. Their own internal landscape subtly altered. That's the true power of marketing poetry on TikTok. You're not just selling a book, you're offering a sanctuary. You're proving that even in the most transformed, modernized, seemingly shallow spaces of our digital existence, the grit of human emotion, the deep love for our physical landscapes, and the profound beauty of well-crafted language absolutely persist underneath the paint. So, now that you've listened to Gerard Manley Hopkins, one of my poems from Cumbrian verse relates to fells in poetry, and I've discussed the merits of using TikTok to promote poetry, I'd love to hear from you. If there's a poem you'd like me to feature as a guest poem in a future episode, please email me at aldencaro78@gmail.com. That's aldencaro78@gmail.com. It could be a classic, something modern, or even a personal favourite that means a lot to you. This way, the podcast becomes a shared journey. So thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, may you find poetry in the everyday, and I'll speak to you again on Wednesday.